Hello, everybody.
Test. Can you hear this one?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hey guys.
Yeah, I can hear you. I got new teeth, so I might lisp a little.
We got new teeth. Let's see.
Yeah. I can't whistle anymore, though.
Well, weird anyways.
Yeah, if I walk really fast, the wind goes through the ears. It makes a little noise, but.
Afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Wes.
Aren't you glad you live in Canada these days?
You watching the news, Wes?
It's just been heartbreaking to see what's happening south of the border. I got to tell you.
Yeah.
Hey, Wes. Can anyone see me right now? My Zoom is being a little bit weird.
I can see you. Yep.
Thank you.
I got 1:59, so we'll start right away.
I like the yellow. That's nice. It's spring.
I finally got to wear some of my new Christmas clothes.
That's awesome.
Christmas, what year?
This year.
Okay.
Okay, I have 2 o'clock. So let's get started. I will bang my pretend gavel and call this meeting to order. I think we have everyone here. Yeah, I saw Jackie. Yeah, okay, everyone's here. It's 100%. We have an agenda that was sent out to us last week, and we're going to make a couple of small adjustments. The resident, Mike Cockrell, who wanted to speak on a council matter, will be deferred to sometime in February, and we'll get into that in a minute. And under emergent items, I'm going to be adding the code of conduct process for Mr. LaFleur to explain it to us all. So I need a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. That's you, Councillor McKay?
Yeah, I'll do it. Start off 2021 the same way the rest of the year. That the January 11th, 2021 agenda be adopted as amended.
Thank you for that. All those in favor, we'll use our participant buttons to say yes or no.
Why?
It's not letting me, but yes.
It's not letting you?
Yeah, mine just did. Mine allowed me. Not for Sheena,
Wes,
though.
are you, because I don't, Sheena and Wes and Natalie haven't voted. What does it look like, Wes or Sheena?
There's just no option for a yes or no at the bottom. It just has the list of participants.
That's weird.
That's what I have too. I've got invite and mute me on the bottom as well.
That's it.
Under participants.
Yes.
Okay, well, so I'll get verbal from Wes and Sheena and Natalie, then a thumbs up from Natalie is a yes. Sheena? Yes. Wes? Yes. Okay.
I voted under reactions. Will that work?
If you put a little thumbs up like this, you mean?
Well, take a look. I got a check mark there. I see Natalie's there now, but I don't have the option under participants.
That's interesting, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. We can do hand votes.
Yeah.
All right, so that passes unanimously. We do have a proclamation, and I see Sherry here ready to accept it, and we have one resident wanting to speak on short-term rentals, but I'll start with the proclamation. Starting off 2021, we try to do this at the beginning of January just to recognize St. Albert's history. So I'm going to read the proclamation, and Sherry, if you want, you can say a few words after, and I will virtually hand this to you and you can accept it. Sounds good?
Great.
All right. Whereas the area has been a First Nations gathering place for at least 5,000 years. And whereas Métis in the employment of the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company worked and resided in St. Albert, and whereas Métis freemen, former employees for the Fur Trade Company, settled with their families on land near and around Big Lake, and whereas on or about January 14th, 1861, Father Lacombe and Bishop Taché founded the St. Albert Mission when, on their way back to Fort Edmonton from Lac St. Anne, they stopped at the top of the hill where Bishop Taché planted his walking stick in the ground, gave his approval for a new mission, and named it St. Albert. And whereas the St. Albert Mission grew quickly to a population of 700 by the year 1870 and became the leading center for education and church administration in Alberta, and whereas the St. Albert Mission became a village in the year 1900, a town in 1904, and a city in 1977. Now, therefore, I, Kathy Heron, Mayor of the City of St. Albert, do hereby ask the residents of St. Albert to help recognize the anniversary of our community, St. Albert. So, well done. That makes us 160. Yes, because 2011 was our 150th, so it's 160 years old this year. Sherry,
Yeah.
do you want to add anything?
Yeah,
First
no,
of all, introduce yourself, Sherry.
Oh, I'm Sherry Strachan. I'm the director of the Musée Heritage Museum and the Heritage Sites, working with the Arts and Heritage Foundation here in St. Albert. And just like all of you, we're busy adjusting and adapting to a virtual world and teaching online and updating our programs. One of the things we do have, though, regularly is our blog. And so there is a blog up today about Founders Walk. Joanne, our curator, was up on Mission Hill in the snow doing a video for that. And she actually explains a little bit more about the day, the actual day of Founders, when we were founded as a mission. So just if anybody asks, point them towards the blog at the museum and you can learn more about the actual Founders Day and which day we think it might have been or could have been. And just in case anybody asks, because there are old history books out there that say that they came down the river in a canoe and walked up the hill, but it was definitely in January, so that did not happen and was incorrect information. So you can always share that. But no, we appreciate the proclamation, and we're always ready and willing to share amazing St. Albert history here, because it is truly an amazing community, and you guys help us make it that way. So thank you for the proclamation. Yeah.
I think it's also maybe, if, weather permitting, it's always nice to go and do the Founders Walk. There's a great resource here that we put some investment dollars into in the city, and you can read. There's a map, I'm assuming, on our city website, but you can learn about the
blog.
Yep.
And
the Healing Garden, and it does take you on a nice guided tour of St. Albert and to some of our historic sites. So.
And we're going to start posting some virtual tours of the Founders Walk as well for those who
That'd be
can't.
good.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. I'll get you this proclamation. Does anyone on council want to add anything? Seeing nothing. All right, I will get this to you right away, Chair.
Okay, great. Thanks so
Thanks
much.
for joining us.
Yes, I appreciate the invite.
Great.
Thanks.
All right, moving on our agenda, we have Mary Noden. She's a resident and she would like to speak to us about short-term rental properties here in St. Albert. So Mary, thank you for the advanced reading information, and I will give you your 5 minutes starting now.
Thank you. Mayor Herron, is there any chance I could have 10 minutes? I'll be as brief as I possibly can.
You know, Mary, I would love to. I honestly would, but
You're really tapped for time?
it's not even that I'm tapped for time, Mary. It's just out of fairness. I
Okay.
tried, because
Let me do my best. This is why I gave you guys the information.
Which was
Sorry
great,
about
yeah.
the late getting it to you. It took a bit to write it up. So again, my name is Mary Noden. I am a resident of St. Albert. And for the last 11 months, myself and my neighbors have had very direct and specific experience with living across from and next to short-term rentals. And I understand that you're developing policies around these short-term rentals, and I would like to share my experiences, but also I have very specific asks of council. If I don't get that far, I've written them all down in a document for you, and I hope you all have that. I've prepared 2 documents. The big one really outlines my learnings. I've really poured myself into understanding what these issues and concerns are. And within that, I have put together a case study, which is really our neighborhood case study. So please do read that. My focus is on 3 specific short-term rental trends. One of them is the distinction between the 2 different short-term rental business models, one being where the owner resides on premise, and the other where there is no owner on premise, and they actually have very different outcomes for a neighborhood. The second is a trend away from homestays or owner on premise short-term rentals to increasingly where owners do not reside at the premise. And finally, how the retail of keyless entry systems and camera monitoring systems are changing how owners and property managers are interacting with guests, and things are increasingly moving towards remote guest management, where the owner never, or the property management company never meets the guest. Everything is done virtually, including monitoring the site. And I focused on those 3 because those 3 pieces had really direct impacts for our neighboring community. So let's try and be brief, very shortly. For the last 11 months, we have lived with these short-term rentals, and it's not 1, it's 2. It started with 1, it's now 2, an upstairs and basement suite in one of the homes. Some of the key features: there is no owner present. It's hosted by a property management company that's operating multi-listing short-term rentals. So they manage a whole number of these. And it's relying very strictly on remote guest management. So there's no one there on a day-to-day basis. In fact, there's rarely anyone, rarely the owner or the property management companies on site. And we're being impacted by a number of things, including the advertised occupancy levels, the volume of strangers coming and going into our close, parking policies that encourage guests to park in our close, not on the main street, smoking policies that are driving guests out of the home and encouraging them to smoke in front of our homes, which has 2 different issues. One is the scrutiny of our lives, and the other is safety hazards around the disposal of cigarettes. The remote management practices that fail to curb undesirable behaviors in our neighborhood, and an unwillingness of the short-term rental management company to recognize and address our neighboring property issues and concerns. And finally, an owner unwilling to follow city licensing processes, bylaws, and final decisions. So although we've done everything in our power to provide our perspectives and to fight against this, we are continuing to experience this even after it's gone to appeals. Is my 5 minutes up?
You actually have 1 minute and 14 seconds according to my timer.
So the biggest impact on us is fear. We are very uncomfortable with this to the point where we're afraid for our children who are trying to play in the clothes. We are afraid for our personal safety and the safety of our property. And if you read the case study that I put within that big document, it goes into much more detail and hopefully gives you a better perspective on this. So what am I asking specifically from council? I'm asking them to really focus on the city's vision. And I have taken it directly from the website. And it's the biggest reason why we moved to St. Albert 10 years ago. I'm asking the city to consider the 2 different models of short-term rentals as 2 different types of business. One where the owner's on site, home-based business. It fits perfectly. It gives people a little extra income. We don't have a problem with that. It's the model where there is no owner on premise, no management on premise, and all the considerable concerns around that. We are asking the city to limit short-term STR, to make it short, in residentially zoned areas.
That is the timer, Mary. I'll give you, hold on just 1 sec. I got to turn this off. I'll give you just a couple minutes to wrap up. And
I'm almost there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
There we go.
So we're asking that that the only model you allow in residentially zoned areas be the home-based business model where the owner is present to deal with issues. We are asking that you ban short-term rental operations that do not offer in-person on-site monitoring of guests, or that you make daily in-person site monitoring a condition of business licensing for the other model. And finally, we're asking that you create or somehow fine-tune your system so that it's both time sensitive and robust, and provides a process for finding and or shutting down unpermitted, non-compliant, or nuisance short-term rentals.
All right, thank you. Now, there is a section of our agenda that we are allowed to ask you questions, so we probably have maybe some for you, and then we'll talk to our staff, so I'll encourage you to stick around for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there any questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Mackay, and then I'll go to Councillor Jolly.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it. And I did read your first page, but I wasn't able to read your case study. Just time got away on me. Can you tell me how many days a month the short-term rentals are occurring at that location?
Well, it has slowed down after Christmas. So right now it's every few days. We have people coming from the basement suite and or the upper suite. But before Christmas in the early fall, it was booked almost every day with a typical turnover rate of every 1 to 5 days. They were advertising up to 10 people on the main level and upper suite, and another 3 to 4 on the bottom suite. So potentially we could see 28 or more strangers. It never got quite that high, but there were weeks when it was above 20 different guests coming and going from our clubs.
And when you had that number of guests, were there a certain activity associated to that? Like, was it a party associated to it?
No,
like, I mean,
no.
was it just people that were visiting?
It's a combination of how many people can stay there. So I think the largest number staying at any one time was 6 different people that we were aware of. But then you have people sometimes staying for 1 day, sometimes staying for 3 days, 5 days, rarely more than 7 days. So it was as much about the turnover of people.
Okay, so you haven't, I mean, the activity that I've seen in other jurisdictions around having, you know, where people rent them for house parties or rent them for other activities.
Sorry, excuse me, we weren't having that issue, but
okay.
What we were having is parking issues, traffic issues, and the smoking on the street was probably our biggest issue, because it was regularly driving people out where they would congregate and watch us live our lives. And that's a very uncomfortable situation to be in.
Yeah. And you live in a cul-de-sac, correct?
I do.
And this is at one of the ends of the cul-de-sac,
That's
correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously coming in, it's the key entry
If you come
point
in, you have to turn around at the end and come back out. So it's twice the traffic you might normally see.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate, thank you again for your presentation. And I'm sorry this is such a problem for you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jolie.
Thank you. And thank you for presenting today. I know I've been looking into this since 2017 was the earliest email I could find. And it's pretty outrageous that this is happening on your street, because from what I understand, it's illegal to have this type of business in St. Albert. So from what I understand, you're asking for us to kind of almost loosen our bylaws. So this type of business is permitted just with kind of rules surrounding it. Is that what you're asking for?
Not specifically. Currently, they were willing to accept this short-term rental if the owner lived on premise under the home-based business, which we had no problem. But there was no provision for dealing with any other type of business in a residential area. So they were trying to operate a different form of business, not a home-based business in a residential area.
Yeah. Okay. I guess
sorry.
I'll follow up with administration, because I've been told that that's illegal in St. Albert.
It is, but it's still operating.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor Heron.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. You said we, and then when I look at your letters, they're not signed by anybody. So are
You're
you
right.
on yourself, on behalf of yourself, or are you authorized to speak on behalf of a whole bunch of your neighbors? And because you said you live across the street and next door, so that's
okay. This time speaking to you, I didn't go out and get authorization from all of my neighbors. However, we jointly put together a joint statement of issues and concerns for the appeal board, where 8 different households signed that, and these issues and concerns come directly from that statement. So am I authorized? Am I not authorized? I'm authorized to speak on behalf of my family for sure.
Okay, and so do you live next door, or do you live across the street?
I live across the street. Many of the concerns came from people that had that visual awareness of what was going on. So most of the properties across the street were the most vocal.
Right. And like I know this couple, they live in St. Albert, and I've known them for like 20 years. They're very responsible. And
Yes.
every year they go to Mexico for 3 months, and they short-term rental their house through Airbnb while they're gone to Mexico. But they still own the house. Are you opposed to that? You think the person should be in the house who lives there the whole time the short-term rental is there, or you're just concerned with people who don't live there at all?
No, you know what, personally, and I can't speak to anyone else on this because I haven't asked them, I'm not opposed to that, because it's not being, as I understand from you, it's one person residing there for 3 months, or is it a continuous change of people for 3 months?
I don't know, but I know what happens is they go to Mexico for like 3 months in the winter, and they Airbnb their house, and they're, you know, I don't know if it's one person. Obviously, if somebody came and said they'd want to stay there for the 3 months, they'd probably take that one person.
Yeah.
It is
My big
short-term nature, so I would assume it's probably more than one person.
Yeah, my biggest issue is that ongoing changeover of people. What happened in our case is because the property management company and owner weren't on premise to kind of figure things out with the guests, that became our responsibility. We monitored, we documented, we got back to the management company, we told them what our issues, our concerns are. So if you don't have someone that can be there, be present, that responsibility gets pushed out to the neighborhood. And maybe that hasn't happened in this situation, but it happened regularly in our situation. And that's part of my big concern.
And then your concerns were stated as smoking and parking and traffic. And like those kind of things can happen in anybody's house, right? Like
absolutely.
They don't smoke inside anymore. They come outside to smoke. And I have a neighbor who lives at the corner, and she rents out 3 different rooms in her house and has 4 cars parked all over the street, right? And then I have another neighbor who has 3 kids, and they all have a car, and they have some other car in their driveway, and they're always parking on the street too. So you can always have parking issues. So my concern, and smoking too, because people like to go. And so my concern, has there been any safety issues, and have people been confronted by like you know, rude people and those kind of issues?
Yes, and I encourage you to read the section that is the case study in there.
Right, okay.
If you can look at the documents we provided and the stories we gave to the appeals board, we have had specific safety concerns. We have had situations with people drinking on the road beside their vehicles. We have had people flicking cigarette butts into our bushes, which is a danger, or putting them into the plastic garbage bins, which is another potential fire hazard. And I know that this can happen anywhere. Again, we've had one of the moms who's afraid to go out running at night now because she had a situation where this congregating strangers, and it's all about strangers not having the ability to know people, to develop those relationships that create those social contracts. She came home and, the whole congregation of men watched her, and she was afraid to even go to her home. She went and stood in the bushes in the dark until they went inside before she would go in her own home. Those are the kinds of situations that are scaring us.
Okay. So
and sorry, just to speak to the families on the street, when you have this much traffic of people that don't live there and aren't aware of these children that move around between homes, that play with each other, and that try and play street hockey, that presents a danger.
But I guess my main question is, though, that there hasn't been any confrontations so far to date, or fights, or anybody hasn't got hurt, or there's been people who have been scared because they've seen strangers in their neighborhood, and issues of smoking and parking.
Or drunken people lying on the street, or yelling between the guests, yelling and screaming between the guests that have had to be evicted.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay, thank you very much. I am supportive of somebody who owns the house going away, like my friends do, because I know them and they're very responsible. But I'm not supportive of just a house just 100% rental, and nobody lives there except people coming in and out.
Could I speak to that very, very briefly?
Yes.
Sure.
One of the sections in the document I wrote, I've gone through, I've sort of tried to tease out approaches from municipalities around the world. So this is section 4. And one of the strategies is to limit how many days a month or a year a property can be rented out for. And should the city choose to look at it from that perspective, that becomes an option by saying, for 3 months of the year, but no more than that. And then you're not getting into that same ongoing issue.
And just a supplementary question, Madam Mayor. And what would you see as a reasonable number of days that somebody should rent their house a month? What would you think would be?
I think that
and I don't know if there's a right answer. I
don't know if there is a right answer. 30 days, absolutely. 30 days is easy. 60 days, if it's spread out and not this continuous revolving door. I don't know that I have a great answer for you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Madam.
All right, that's okay, Councillor Watkins. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for coming and sharing your experience. I wonder, with COVID, do you know if protocols even are being looked after at the house? I mean, I know some folks who attach themselves to Airbnb will come out and say, we're going to let the house sit for 2 days before anybody comes in. We've got cleaning people, and they name who the cleaning people are, and they explain what they do. Just from a purely pandemic point of view, do you know if these protocols are being followed?
And I'm going to say yes and no. They do have professional cleaners that come in between every set of guests. They don't let the house sit for multiple days, but they do have the cleaners come in and, I assume, clean all the surfaces. And it has been quite busy during the pandemic. However, when the city went into lockdown, we had the very next day, we had a group of 6 young adults with 6 different vehicles. So I'm assuming coming from 6 different locations, stay in the upper suite. And when I contacted the property management company about parking issues and that, they basically said it's not their problem.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
you're suspecting that they were congregating in a way that Alberta Health Services has asked us not to.
That would be my assumption. I doubt that the 6 young adults all lived in the same household.
Right. Okay,
But
well,
I
I mean,
don't know.
that's symptomatic of the whole situation, and I
Yeah.
appreciate the uncertainty that comes with this kind of thing. I like Councillor Watkins think that Airbnbs for many are a good option, but there needs to be excellent supervision. There needs to be a level of comfort for neighbors, and so it's good to know that. Good to know what you and your fellow neighbors are feeling about this. So thanks for all of that background.
You're welcome.
I'll ask just a couple. And Mary, is the property across the street from you still on a website advertising it for rental?
For 3 weeks, they went to 30-day rentals, and they are back to everyday rentals as of this weekend for both suites.
Okay, so I might
So
have
they're back to
ask,
daily rentals. You can rent for 1 day or 30 days, up to you.
I'm gonna have to ask our staff because I thought the appeal, like they were denied a permit and this was
They were?
appealed. And so this is not working legally then.
No, it's not working legally. We phoned, or my neighbor Diana phoned this morning, and the city is aware. They caught it themselves, and they're looking into what their legal options are.
Okay, good. I'm gonna get someone on our staff to let council know exactly what that is, because it's just simple enforcement. You think that wouldn't be the hardest thing, but okay. My second question to you was, are you under the impression, or were you told by somebody at the city that we are in the process of developing a short-term rental bylaw?
I was, and perhaps I'm wrong, or that you were considering or reviewing your bylaws, perhaps. That was my understanding.
Okay, because in preparation for today, I kind of asked our city manager and our head of legal, and they were unaware that we were in the process of developing.
Okay.
So I'm going to actually see if there's some clarification on that when we start talking to our staff.
Okay, very good.
Okay, any last questions for Mary? Okay, Mary, I'll let you stick around for just a little bit longer because the next thing is business arising from your presentation.
Okay,
so let's go on to that. Does anyone have questions? I'm pretty sure Kevin or Carrie are prepared, but I also see Adrian online as well. I'll start with Natalie, then Wes.
Thank you. So I'm going to reference CI 1 2018 and CI 200 2019. So both of those were inquiries regarding short-term rentals. And in one of them, it said that really what we were told in the presentation, that home occupation would have to be secondary to someone living in the house. So I guess what's happening with this particular property, but really properties across the city.
Sorry, was that a question?
No, not you, Mary. Is it just after your questioning the enforcement of this, Natalie?
Yeah, enforcement, I think, is
okay.
what I'm curious about. I don't understand how this is still happening.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get to you right away, Ray. Go ahead, Adrian.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, to Councillor Jolly's note in the CIs, short-term rental is something that does not fit within the land use bylaw right now. We respond on a complaint basis, just as with any other land use bylaw type of issue, which is what we did with this property. We are aware that there are a number of more properties than this single instance where people have not complained to the city at this point. We have been working on land use bylaw and business license bylaw amendments, which would put ourselves more in line with what Calgary and Edmonton do, which is to basically clarify some of the rules of the road and provide some, I guess, guidance for hosts is what they're referred to, as to how they're supposed to interact with the neighborhood. Of course, we haven't brought that to council yet, but that would be forthcoming within the next couple of months, theoretically.
So is that kind of response to the MDP update, or?
That's independent of the MDP. That's just, it has been something that's come up, as we're aware. There was, I think, some parties at a Airbnb property a year ago on New Year's that raised concerns. And then I think during council interactions, we've kind of heard from different council members that they were curious about what could be done. So we've been just looking at it on the kind of back burner, but we've gotten to the point where we're pretty close to bringing something forward now for council to respond to or provide direction on.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Broadhead, then Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So through you to administration, one of the things that caught my attention in the presentation or the documentation submitted by Ms. Noden was the whole idea of the commercialization of Airbnb and VRBO. The underlying premise, of course, is that this is space in a person's home, or there's space available and they rent it out short term. But if we are now having large commercials, entities coming up and buying houses and entering into the short term market, is that an experience that you're noting in this particular industry? Is that the commercialization of this whole process is starting to take place now?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Broadhead. So that's not the experience that we've been gathering thus far. I think there's a lot more to what Councillor Watkins had said. People that leave the city short term, or for whatever life circumstances no longer live in their property. We haven't seen, some sort of a conglomerate coming and buying units, which I think would be a per unit cost would be fairly high on that, but we have not seen that. At this point.
So one of the things that I heard from the hotel industry is that they feel grieved because the legislative framework sort of monitoring and controlling the Airbnb, the short-term rental market, doesn't require the same sort of support taxes and stuff, and so that they can undercut the hotel industry. As you start to anticipate what's going on, what are your thoughts around equalizing the playing field, if you will?
It's a good question. You're right. I mean, any sort of hotelier has to comply with a lot more regulations, and there's room taxes and things like that, which I think they probably do have some sort of. They're probably not wrong that they are competing against somebody that has less rules, and it's the same with, an Uber kind of a situation in my mind. It's new emerging kind of things that I don't think regulation has caught up with yet.
Okay, fair enough. And then the last thing, and maybe it's not for you, Adrian. It seems that there's an apparent disinterest in complying with our business bylaws. How hard is it to enforce the bylaw provisions? What are the penalties, I guess?
Yeah, so thank you for that. It's actually the land use bylaw is the more probably onerous process, and that's what I think a lot of people had questioned. Why is this particular property taking so long? And there's a lot of process that goes along with it. With the business license bylaw, it's a much more binary yes/no kind of equation, which is why we want to utilize the business license bylaw much more directly on these type of things, because it's clear that if you don't have a business bylaw or a business license for this type of a property, you automatically are not in compliance, and you can get a fine of up to $1,000 for that. So that can garner some attention quickly.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Watkins, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's about, so just a question. So this concern that Ms. Noden has is about a property which was taken to the Development Appeal Board and lost at the Development Appeal Board and now continues to operate.
Yes, so that's my understanding is the appeal was dismissed in mid-December, and we were, I guess, in our own due diligence, we monitored it just around Christmas break or whatever it was, and noticed that it was back up on Airbnb when it should not have been.
Okay, and so why don't we just issue a stop order, a stop order pursuant to section 5.1 of the land use bylaw, where it says where there's a direct contravention of the land use bylaw and it's proven, and we've got proof because, you know, you just said that he's renting it out, and that's can be a notice up to $10,000 fine, not $1,000 per business license. So I'd recommend that we just put a stop order on him pursuant to section 5.1 of the land use bylaw, because it is a land use bylaw issue since it already went to Subdivision and Development Appeal Board and their use was denied.
So I don't know that I can.
I would like to have Mr. Azar's comments on that. Like, why don't we just, if this is still operating and it's proven, why don't we just put a stop order on them? And if they don't like the results of the stop order, then they can take us to court and fight a fine of up to $10,000.
Adrian, I saw your fingers go up, but then I'll go to David.
Yeah, so the enforcement action is occurring right now with this property. I don't know that
from a licensing point of view, or
from a licensing point of view.
I know that I'm inquiring about a land use bylaw. Why don't we just issue a stop order on land use bylaw?
I would say that our experience with stop order is, again, it's a much more lengthy process, whereas the licensing bylaw is a more rapid response.
But this is a land use issue, and that is a land use remedy, and it's also 10 times the fine of the business bylaw. So my recommendation would be we put a stop order on it if we have any proof.
I appreciate that.
And you say that's section 5.1, Councillor Watkins?
Bylaw enforcement and administration. In 5.1,
look at that.
The section that talks about the penalty not exceeding $10,000 exclusive of costs.
David, did you have any comment on that? Or is
no, other than that, you know, I haven't been asked to look at this before. I'm sure Mr. You know, having heard Councillor Watkins' comments, I'm sure that Mr. Slatt and I will be getting together to look at that as an option.
Right. Any more questions for anyone on staff? I did, Kevin, I just scribbled on my notes that we'll look for a land use bylaw and business license bylaw amendments to bring to agenda committee. We'll get it on the agenda. And Adrian, at that time, we won't go into details now what those amendments might look like in following some of the leads of cities like Calgary that you said. But thank you for highlighting this. And Mary, thank you for bringing it to council's attention. It has been kind of under the radar, I think, for us over the last 3 years, but stories like yours and specific examples will go a long way to push it forward faster. So thank you for that. And good luck. Okay, we're moving on in the agenda to the consent agenda. There's a couple of things on consent. If somebody wants to make the motion. Councillor Broadhead, thank you.
That the recommendations in the following agenda report be approved. 6.1, regular council meeting minutes of December 21st, 2020. And 7.1, time extension request, bylaw opt-out flyers.
Thank you. I'll just call for raising of your hands for the vote. So I'm seeing unanimous for consent agenda. All right, so on consent, we had the minutes from December 21st, which I won't read. And we also had a recommendation that was passed that said that a deadline extension for the following item be approved. Time extension request for the bylaw regarding opt-out flyers, and that will be coming to council in Q2 of 2021. Q2 2021. Okay. The next thing, there's not much on this agenda today, is emergent items. I have added the code of conduct process, mostly because there has been some significant public interest in the code of conduct, the current complaint. So Mr. LaFleur, if you could indulge us with just an overview of how this will work, maybe some timelines, and then I'm gonna let council ask you a few questions if they have any. Does that work? And you need to unmute. There we go.
Yes,
Yeah.
actually, I just got a note on my screen. I never got one before saying I'm muted. Usually I have to wait for someone like you to tell me I'm muted. Anyway, so things are getting better. So first of all, just some general comments without regard to any particular case, some general comments about the process, which I think is important to set the stage here. All council members are aware, of course, that there is a code of conduct bylaw that we have, because we have to have it. The MGA says every municipality must have a code of conduct, so we have one. It's a fairly lengthy one. It runs to 20 odd pages, and it covers a great many topics, some that are required to be covered according to the MGA and its regulation, and some that are just voluntarily covered. And any member of the public can make a complaint. And we've recently amended the bylaw so that the former process of involving what's called an integrity commissioner is no longer, temporarily at least, is no longer in effect. What happens now, if a person who wants to make a complaint makes it to the office of the chief legislative officer, which currently happens to be me, and they have to provide certain things. They have to provide a lot of personal information to prove that they're eligible to make a complaint. I don't release that, of course, since it's personal information, but I have to be sure that it's the person making the complaint is basically is someone who's an eligible elector in St. Albert. Then that makes you eligible to make a complaint. Beyond that, they have to set out, obviously, the substance, like what exactly are they complaining about, and very, very specifically, what sections of the code of conduct is it alleged that the councillor has breached. That's essential for a valid complaint. And then if there's any evidence that they have, to show, to prove, if you will, that the code was breached, they're supposed to put that as well in their complaint. So that's the process of making a complaint. It's fairly simple. It is, when I say simple, that doesn't mean that we treat it in a slipshod manner, because this is something that's important for me to emphasize to all of council. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding. In other words, what this is, a proceeding in which a member of council, one of your colleagues, can be accused of a member of the public of conduct that, if true, if it were upheld, could have serious professional consequences for that person. So we treat it seriously. We insist that, if a person is going to make a complaint, they do it in accordance with the rules. There is one slight exception right now. The bylaw says that you're supposed to make the complaint either delivered to my offices on the 3rd floor or sent by mail. That's a little bit problematic right now. As we all know, the 3rd floor of City Hall is closed to the public, and the mail delivery, internal mail delivery, is extremely sporadic. So while we're in lockdown, I've been prepared to allow people to do it by email, but everything else they have to do. They have to specifically set out why they're saying there's a breach, what sections of the code are alleged to have been breached, what conduct is alleged to constitute a breach. All of that I'm very strict about. So then when a complaint comes in under the process that we now have in place, I give the complaint to the councillor and say to them, look, you have an opportunity to respond. And I give them an opportunity, what I consider to be a reasonable length of time to respond. If the council member comes back and says, I need more time because of this or that reason, I look at the reasons. If they appear to be reasonably valid on their face, I'm willing to give more time. But, you know, after that's all been established, then we have a process in place whereby there's a complaint. The rest of council doesn't see the complaint at that point. The councillor who's complained about, of course, does. That councillor has an opportunity within the prescribed time to make a written reply to the complaint. When that comes in, then I have only one last function. I look at the complaint, I look at the response, and I say, is there any discrepancy on the facts? Like, is the complainant saying, well, I allege the councillor did X, Y, and Z, and the councillor is saying, no, I never did that. Then we have a discrepancy on the facts. And if that's the case, I call in an investigator, an outside, external, qualified investigator to look at the facts, interview people, and make a report to council saying, here are my findings of fact. Okay, that's what an investigator does. An investigator, and this is unlike the way it worked before the amendment, the investigator doesn't make a judgment call as to whether there's been a breach of the code. That's council's job, only council's job. What the investigator does, if necessary, is help you resolve any disputes about the facts. And then when all of that is done, the complaint, the reply, and investigator's report, if it's necessary, which of course it won't always be, but those things go to council. Initially, council will get to, I shouldn't say initially, they will go to council. Council would have the opportunity at that point to allow members of the public to make submissions. If the fact of the complaint is in the public domain, sometimes it will be. Sometimes a complainant will have voluntarily made it public. Sometimes complainants want to stay anonymous, and that's fine, then it stays anonymous. But in any event, council will have an opportunity to discuss the matter in camera. And then if council wishes to do anything about the complaint, make any motions to, make a finding that there's been a breach, or a finding, a motion, it could be a motion to say, council declares there has been no breach of the code. That could happen too, right? And if there is a breach, to determine what sanctions, if any, because remember, just the fact that there's been a breach doesn't necessarily mean there'll be sanctions, but there could be. And so all of that goes to council, and it's only council that makes that determination, nobody else. Okay, so that's basically the process of how we handle any complaint that is made alleging that a council member has contravened or breached the code of conduct. Now, as council members are aware, there is a currently outstanding complaint. I don't feel there's any problem with me confirming that, because that has been made public. The complainant has chosen not to remain anonymous and has gone public. Okay, so I'm not going to say any more about it, because that complaint council has not seen. The council member against whom it has been made has seen it, of course, but has not made a reply. The council member will have until I think it's 10 in the morning on the 5th of February to make a reply. And then after that, as I just mentioned, I will determine if there's any discrepancy in the facts. If there's not, I presume it could go to council fairly soon thereafter for a determination as to what council wants to do with it. If there is a dispute on the facts, it would take a little longer, because I would have to get an investigator involved to look at resolving the factual dispute. So that's what we're looking at here. That's the timeline we're looking at. I don't want to be any more specific than that, because it's a matter of fairness to the council member involved. If I say anything more, or if council wants to get into any more detail, that's basically prejudging, or could be alleged, could be held as dealing with the facts in advance. We don't want to do that. We want this to be a proper process where both the council and the member who against whom the complaint has been made are treated fairly and given every opportunity to deal with it. So that's really all that I have at this point. If there are any questions of a general nature, I'm certainly willing to entertain them.
Thank you. And yeah, let's try to keep them to general nature on the process, I guess. So
Yeah,
Councillor
on the
Mackay.
process, not the specifics.
Yeah, Councillor Mackay, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to reiterate, this is about the process, and it's just something you said in the last 5 minutes, Mr. LaFleur, and it was around having to engage potential investigator. Previously, when we had independent integrity commissioner, we wouldn't have had to do that. That was the role of the independent integrity commissioner. So will you, so it's not going to be you or somebody from the office, we'll have to go out and engage an investigator?
That's absolutely correct. There's no way that I or anyone internal would purport to investigate and make findings of facts in a situation like that. It's just not appropriate for us to do that. We would get someone qualified and external to do that.
And that process is only if there's a difference in the substance of the complaint or the facts are argued by one or the other parties.
That's correct. If the two parties, the complainant and the counsel responding, if it's very clear reading their documents that they have a different view of the facts of what happened, then we have to resolve that. You can't decide as a council until you have a report. Even then, it really would be up to you to resolve the discrepancy in the facts, but at least you have an independent report from an independent and qualified investigator to help you with the factual issue.
Fair enough. And is there, when we eliminated the office, integrity office, there was some money assigned to that? Is there money that's still tagged on to this? So is it going to cost, like, are we capped by a certain number in relation to costs for this investigator, or is there even a process? Because in a previous one, there was some concern about the process. So how will we go about engaging an independent investigator, assigning a process? I'm assuming that person would do the process. And then, or do we cap a cost? Is there certain costs that we would cap this with? Because I mean, potentially this could get, a situation could get quite expensive.
No, we can't cap a cost. We can't prejudge how much investigation, how much time it'll take, how many witnesses may have to be interviewed. Okay. I think, Councilor Mackay, from your background, you'll understand that very well. Investigations go where they go. And in terms of the cost, we don't have anything budgeted for this, because you never know. We could go 3 or 4 years and never have a complaint, right? Or never need an investigator. But if that happened, I would certainly speak with our friend Diane McMorty about what the source of funding would be for an outside investigator. But we haven't crossed that bridge yet, obviously. In this.
All right. Okay. And if we needed to get outside legal opinion, does that come out of your office, or how do we assign that cost? Is there a cost associated? If you needed to get outside expert opinion on a particular matter related to any investigation, are costs come out of your budget, or is that included in my previous question?
The matter of which budget would pay for it has not yet been resolved. It's funny you should ask that now. I've been already in discussions with Diane McMorty, our finance director, about that. I can say that we've already got a direction in respect of the complaint now, that if there are such costs incurred, that we'll track them. We'll specifically make sure that they're not lost in a bigger budget, so that how much we're paying for legal counsel for the city will be known, and the public will be able to know what that figure is. But as far as which budget ultimately pays for it, I'm not sure whether I shouldn't say whether it matters. I guess it does matter, but that hasn't been determined yet. Again, we're kind of in uncharted waters here. So I can assure you we won't stiff the lawyer for their bill. We can't do that.
Yeah, well, they'll have their hands in pockets.
Right.
Anyways, thanks. I appreciate it. I just wanted to know, I was the only one that voted to keep the Integrity Commission. All right.
And,
there we go. All right, thanks. That was just a comment off the cuff.
I saw Councillor Broadhead's hand go up. And Councillor Jolly, do you have a question too? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question to Mr. LaFleur. So in order to keep the process clean and everybody gets treated appropriately and fairly throughout it all, there's a requirement on the rest of us to keep ourselves clean as well. Can you just go over what the expectation on the rest of council is during the interim period here?
Yeah, I can do that. Again, it's almost impossible to say, what kind of specific questions you might be asked by a member of the public, what position you'll find yourself in. But I can say that generally, the law is very clear that when you finally come to the day when you're going to make a decision on this complaint, like what are you going to do? Are you going to find there's a breach? If not, or if so, are you going to, what sanctions are you going to find? When you come to that day, you have to be able to say that you approach it with an open mind. There's even some recent case law to the effect that you may be asked to swear an affidavit of your open-mindedness. That's something new. That's a new development in the law. And in my view, it's probably a good development. And so in order to do that, you have to be very circumspect in what you say to constituents. No one, absolutely no one, and by no one I mean no court, nobody expects you to tell a resident, sorry, I cannot talk to you at all. That's just unrealistic. You're politicians, you represent people, you have to treat them with respect. But you don't have to give them a final judgment on it. You can listen to them. Just make sure that you tell them that this is a matter that you haven't got all the evidence in yet. And when you do get in all the evidence and all the legal advice, perhaps, if that's appropriate, and perhaps an investigator's report, if that's appropriate. Once you've done that, just make sure you tell people that email you or want to talk to you that you are required by law to keep an open mind. Now, an open mind, I want to emphasize, and please don't laugh at what I'm about to say, because this comes right out of a Court of Appeal decision. An open mind for a counselor doesn't mean an empty mind, right? So you can certainly listen to people, but you have to remain open to persuasion either way. So as long as you have that mindset and are willing, if asked, to swear to that under oath, and are careful to tell that to anyone who approaches you, any member of the public, I think you'll be fine.
Thank you very much. That answers my question, Madam Mayor.
And Councillor Broadhead, Mr. LaFleur and I did talk a little bit earlier today about crafting a message that would explain just what he said, so we can have something that that David has helped us with. So we'll get that hopefully by the end of today. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. LaFleur. So just in terms of receiving emails or the public wanting to come to council to speak on this matter, and I'm sorry if I missed that because I was reading through some of the advice, sorry, here. We should be forwarding emails, or emails will be all kept in one place, and there'll be something that we can craft back to them that you're going to provide us with around process.
I'm going to try to provide you with something that can be used for almost any type of email you might get, and it's on its way. Not ready yet.
Okay, and then in terms of people wanting to come who want to register and speak to us at a public meeting, when does that happen?
Well, at some point, when all of the process I've described a few minutes ago and all of that has come to its conclusion, at some point there will be a council meeting, whether a regular one, a special one, I don't know, but there will be a council meeting at some point where this complaint is on the agenda. And at that point, it would be my recommendation that if people wish to speak to the complaint, they be allowed to do it, but then it would be my responsibility, in conjunction perhaps with external counsel, to make sure that the counselor against who the complaint is made has an opportunity to respond, right? That's important too. If people want to speak, fine, but the counselor has to have an opportunity to respond alone or with legal counsel, whatever. So we're going to have to be careful about how we craft and how we structure that meeting when it eventually gets decided. But that's the time. I just want to assure you, I want to assure everyone that if you're worried about the members of the public having the opportunity to not just send an email or post something on Twitter, but to actually speak directly to the whole of council, my recommendation is that we allow that opportunity, as long as we allow the counselor in question the opportunity to respond. Fair enough?
Yeah. So just to be doubly clear, that would happen only at one council meeting. And I say that because lots of times our residents know something's coming up on an agenda and they won't necessarily be at the meeting where that item is on the agenda, but they might speak about it at a different time. So, but we are asking the residents in this case that there will be an opportunity to be in front of council.
Correct. And of course, as usual, they can also make written submissions, right? I mean, that's
Okay.
fair time.
I just wanted to be clear because I want to be able, if people want to come, I want to be able to say there will be a time, but not multiple times.
Time, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I saw Councillor Watkins' hand go up.
I just want to thank Mr. Lafleur for explaining the process to us, because it's going to be a lot fairer for this one than it was for the previous. There were none of these restrictions in place around social media, phoning, anything, or talking or anything under the previous one. So I want to thank you for putting a fair process in place. And I think anybody going forward through this in the future should be very happy that it's now a fair process.
All right. Any more questions? Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lafleur, in the past, with the previous code of conduct complaints, there wasn't an opportunity for the public to speak the day that council made the decision. So this seems to be quite a stretch from what happened. Was it last year? And I'm trying to figure out where in these processes, when I read the bylaw, that's actually what went about, because I don't remember that this was supposed to be a dramatic change, that we were supposed to basically have a whole hearing before council made its decision. That's not what happened in the past.
There's a couple of, to answer your questions, a couple of things. First of all, there has been a fairly significant amendment to the bylaw. The process is not the same as it was before. The process before made it very, very clear that any reports from the Integrity Commissioner are strictly confidential. They're dealt with in camera, and it only becomes a public matter if council chooses to go public. It's quite different now. I think it's a better process. There's nothing, it's true, Councillor Hughes, if you look at the existing revised process, there's nothing specifically says that if the public has an opportunity, if the public wants to, they can have an opportunity to address the complaint. A couple of things about that. First of all, in this case, as we all know, the complainant has gone public. It is a matter of public record that a complaint has been made. It seems, to me, it seems to be kind of ingenuous to suggest that the members of the public who've already, in many cases, have already made comments, in different social media and emails and whatnot, should not have an opportunity. That said, this is just my recommendation. If the majority of council wants to deny the public the right, then the majority of council can make a motion to do that.
So there's nothing in the bylaw that says that we're supposed to follow this new procedure. You've just interpreted it to be.
I'm basically making a recommendation that based on the new procedure and based on how it unfolds and based on the current situation, that we have the fact that, a complaint has been made is in the public domain, it's been well publicized. Based on all of that, I would recommend that we give the public an opportunity, but I want to emphasize what I said before, and give the council member in question an opportunity to respond. I think that's just as important as giving people in the public an opportunity to say their piece. It's equally important to give the council member an opportunity to respond. That's the essence of procedural fairness. And that's what I'm recommending.
So this is not going to be a decision or discussion in camera. This is going to go to the court of public opinion, have everything said there, and then go in camera. That's how the procedure is now going? Because, this is a dramatic change from where everything was discussed in a confidential manner. The report that was even brought forward to council remained confidential.
Correct.
And the discussion remained confidential. And the only thing that would have been public was if there had been a public motion. And you're taking it from there to the only thing that's confidential would be the council discussion. Like this is not just a small change. This is a dramatic change, not just removing the integrity commissioner.
Well, I'm not going to use adjectives. I will say it certainly is different than it was before.
So how can any of the defendants feel comfortable or confident that through this procedure that this will, the code of conduct complaints will not be used as a political weapon?
I can't answer that.
I don't see how there's any protection to ensure that there's integrity and that there's natural justice that would be occurring.
Okay, well, I've told you what the procedure is under the new bylaw. I've told you how my recommendation will be to handle it and what steps I think are important to be sure that natural justice is respected. If you don't agree with me, well, those are my opinions and those are yours.
Okay. Yeah, it does look like this will be used as a political weapon. Thank you.
I'd also add that the one previous complaint of conduct, if anyone from the public had wanted to speak to it, I'm sure I would have allowed it. I don't think I've ever denied any member of the public to address council on any topic. So it just so happens that this conduct complaint has a little bit more interest, I guess. All right, is there anything else? All right. Agenda item number 9 is information requests, notice of motions and announcements. Thank you, Mr. Fleur. Any IRs or notices of motion? All right, seeing none. We are now on to presentations, which there is none, so no business arising. So we have 2 in-camera conversations, one with Mr. Scoble and one without. So I need somebody to make a motion to go in camera. Go ahead, Councillor Mackay.
I'll bookend this meeting. That council move in camera to have a confidential dialogue with the Chief Administrative Officer pursuant to Section 24(1)(a) of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act.
All right, thank you for that. All those in favor? That is unanimous. All right, we are now in camera. So whoever the host is needs to give me powers to make a breakout room. All right. Give me 2 secs, guys. Mr. Scoble, do you need any staff in there other than yourself?
Nope, just me.
All right. All right, I think that's everyone. You can go to the breakout room now.
Did you see Cheryl's question on chat?
Nope.
She asked your question.
No, it's okay, Cheryl. I can record it.